Afternoon, everyone. We're here at the American Military Museum, and today I'm going to discuss the crazy and potentially tragic story of when the U.S. President, Franklin Roosevelt, was almost killed. Now, what I'm in front of is a giant torpedo launcher, a device which will become a crucial part of today's story. But we're going to start off with a little background first before we get into the actual event. It's 1943. The tables have turned against the Axis powers, and the Allies are now on the offensive. The Big Three need to set up a meeting in Tehran in order to discuss future plans. The Big Three are Churchill, Stalin, and Roosevelt. Roosevelt has to make an arduous journey from the United States to the Middle East. He will be boarding the USS Iowa, a giant battleship, which will be escorted by multiple smaller ships, cruisers, destroyers, and submarines. One of those ships is a destroyer called the USS William Porter, which is a Fletcher-class destroyer. This destroyer will have torpedo tubes like this one. Now on to the actual story. During the voyage over to Tehran, Roosevelt wanted to see a couple of drills practiced because he was a giant Navy fan. He was a former Navyman himself. So, the first drill that they went over was an anti-aircraft drill, where all the ships started firing at balloons for target practice. Later, a torpedo drill was put in place, where the USS Iowa was going to be the target. You could already kind of see the problem here. All the escort ships are going to be using dummy torpedoes and firing at the USS Iowa. The USS William Porter, following suit, decided to do the same thing. Well, they had to. We're doing the same thing. So, firing the first torpedo in Tube 1, it was a misfire. The torpedo got stuck in the tube, and they moved on to the second tube. The second fire was a success. It went into the water, and it went straight for the Iowa, as planned. A couple moments later, the crew realized something. What they fired wasn't a dummy torpedo, it was actually a live torpedo heading straight towards the ship that the president was on. But they didn't want to break radio silence, so what they did instead was use a light signal to Morse code over to the Iowa that a torpedo was coming straight towards them, a live torpedo. But the miscommunication happened because they were signaling to the Iowa that a torpedo was coming from the other side. Like, let's say the Fletcher-class destroyer was here, the Iowa was here. They were saying the torpedo was coming from this side, something that the Fletcher-class destroyer obviously could not see. So the Iowa decided to ignore the message. Later, the crew finally decided that it was more important to save the president's life rather than break radio silence. So they radioed over to the Iowa that there was a live fish in the water and they needed to take evasive action, which the Iowa did, barely saving the president's life. If you want more information on the story, at least the two sources I got this information from, you can either see a video from Potential History about the USS William Porter, because it has an interesting service life, or you could read the article that I read from HistoryNet.com about the USS William Porter. Now, this crazy story aside, it's really meant to teach kind of one lesson, and it doesn't matter how insignificant you think you are, or how small your job is. One event, mistake, or action can make a huge ripple in the waves of history. So, what you're supposed to take away from this really is just keep in mind what you're doing, because you don't know who it might affect, what it might affect, and even where. That's going to be it for today.